Welcome to the Built On Air podcast, the variety show for all things Airtable. In each episode, we cover 4 different segments. It's always fresh and different and lots of fun while you get the insider info on all things Airtable. Our hosts and guests are some of the most senior experts in the Airtable community. Join us live each week on our YouTube channel every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern, and join our active community at BuiltOnAir.com. Before we begin, a word from our sponsor, On2Air Backups. On2Air Backups provides automated Airtable backups to your cloud storage for secure and reliable data protection. Prevent data loss and set up a secure Airtable backup system with On2Air Backups at On2Air.com. As one customer, Sarah, said, having automated Airtable backups has freed up hours of my time every other week and the fear of losing anything. Longtime customer David states, On2Air Backups might be the most critical piece of the puzzle to guard against unforeseeable disaster. It's easy to set up, and it just works. Join Sarah, David, and hundreds more Airtable users like you to protect your Airtable data with On2Air Backups. Sign up today with promo code BuiltOnAir for a 10% discount. Check them out at On2Air.com. And now let's check out today's episode and see what we built on air.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Built on Air podcast. This is season 18, episode 6, and I am Hannah Wigginton. I'm filling in today for Dan Fellers, and we're going to have a great time. We have our amazing co-host, Camille Parks is here, and Alli is here today. And then we have our special guest, Russell, who is going to showcase his awesome MP3 streaming library, and then also tell us a little bit about himself. So we are excited to have everyone here today.
Awesome.
Today we are going to go ahead and go around the base. We'll review kind of what's going on in the Airtable world today and see what everyone is up to. We will talk to Russell and learn more about him, see his streaming library. And then Camille is going to showcase the new record reviews. So she has a presentation for us to tell us more about it. So we're really excited about that. So with that, we will go ahead and go through round the bases and see what's going on in the Airtable communities. Okay, the first one that I saw, which I kind of think is a big deal, this is really more leaning toward tasks, are the new comment, watching, and reaction features in Airtable. I think this is pretty typical for more task management, so it seems maybe they're going to start doing a little more of that.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. You can also thread comments as well. So, you don't have like a endless history over the life of a record. You can talk about a specific topic and then kind of drill into it a little bit more.
Yeah, that's a really great component, especially like if you're used to using Slack too, you can move it there a little more and then react to it in the record, which is super useful.
Yeah, even the fact that you can just react to it, like it's such an easy way to say, I've seen your comment, and we're all very used to doing that.
Agreed. Yeah. I just want to put a thumbs up. And
it's nice. It's nice to have that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I wonder, does this mean Airtable is going to really start being more task management? Do you think they're going to add more features like this?
Well, I think in a way, kind of in a roundabout way, I think they're still going to try and place themselves as a generalist, but they added Gantt functionality to the timeline view relatively recently. The idea of date dependencies being moved to a table level setting. So like they're adding more and more features that make task management easier without necessarily placing themselves as a task management app.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome. So comment, reactions, that's a pretty big deal. Okay, moving on. So Airtable is actually hosting a webinar. It's going to be right after this podcast, actually, like an hour after. So it's the first webinar in a 2-part series on learning how to use Airtable interfaces and using AI, custom views. So if you really want to get a good overview of how to build an interface, this is probably a great way to watch somebody go through and build one, and maybe even discover some new ways to do things. So if you've not really gotten into that, that's probably a neat one to watch. And it looks like they have 2 parts. So.
Awesome. Yeah, I haven't actually attended any of those webinars before, but
yeah, I've signed up for like 1 or 2, but really more of like when they showcase, hey, new features, but then I never attend them. So I'm not a good example. Okay, the next one was, it looks like Lola here is working on a step-by-step tutorial for building Airtable extensions. So if that's something you've thought about doing, this may be a good place to start. I think she's maybe had a couple on there, and so she's going to go through and show you how to do it and how to get started, and probably a good starting place to learn how to build extensions. I know Camille is a pro at it.
I've built a few. I do remember setting up the environment on your local machine to use the SDK library and then publish to the marketplaces. Kind of annoying to set up. But then again, when I set it up the first time, 4 or so years ago, it was the first time I had done something like that, so it could have just been me being a novice. But the good news is you only have to set it up once and then never again. So then it's really a matter of thinking through what your use case is, what are you trying to build, what are the features that would make it easy for the people who want to use this thing, and then trying to, if you were to monetize your extension, as I have done, figuring out how to do that, it's difficult. So there's a lot of interesting things that you have to consider when you build an extension, but I recommend it because it's fun. It's a good way to learn JavaScript and React.
Yeah. Awesome.
It's also an area I see quite a few people asking for help in, and there are less people to respond and give advice on. So if someone's building some or putting together some updated docs for people, I'm sure that'd be very helpful, because it's certainly more technical than most of the work done in Airtable, isn't it?
I would love to be that person to jump in and answer questions, but I'm just so jaded that perhaps it's best for someone else.
Oh, well, maybe now you can direct them to this full course and tutorial on, here's a great place. Because I really haven't seen anything else. So
no, nor have I.
Awesome. Okay. So next, this is kind of something I had seen, and we'll probably have to watch this a couple times, but basically this guy built a workflow that retrieves company details from a single URL, and he uses make in Airtable. And specifically what he does is it performs a search using the SERPer API. So essentially, I guess it scrapes the Google search pages and goes to find all this information by clicking a button. So then it just basically pre-fills all your information, which I thought was pretty neat.
I'm wondering why it's doing it one field at a time. Like, how the steps are set up that it's finding this information and then updating these fields and et cetera. Like how many places is it going to scrape this information?
Yeah. Or is that I was going to say, is that just for the mock-up? But actually, it doesn't.
It could just be for the mock-up, but I feel like that's a lot of work to.
Yeah,
mock that in.
maybe each step is now go and find this information, update the record, go and find the next
Maybe
step.
so.
Could be.
I was going to see. Oh, let's see if we can look here. Catch the webhook. He's got a bunch of routers.
They don't have that many update
record
steps. So maybe they did just do that for the mock-up.
Yeah, they tricked us.
How dare they?
Very cool. I wonder what the application for this is.
Yeah, it's like, is it for maybe an internal CRM and just finding leads or things? I don't know. He didn't say that, but I thought that was kind of neat to
That's
see
cool.
what it's doing. All right. Next we have a, I don't know, kind of a thought. It says maybe no code was a misnomer. Everything is a little bit low code. I'm building more in Zapier, Retool, Airtable, and Coda lately, but they all need custom scripts to do what I want.
Yeah.
And, I think there's probably a balance. You can do a lot of things, but you will run into some things that you kind of have to go outside of it.
It's a low barrier to entry, right? That's more the point of it. You can create something of value with no code, but as Zach has found, the more advanced and specific to your workflow you want to get, you might end up doing some scripting.
Yeah. You can get really far with all of those tools except for Retool without coding anything, barring something like a formula, right? I mean, if we want to get philosophical about it, technically a formula is also scripting. It's just a very specific scripting language. But other than that, like Airtable and Coda, although Coda has some fairly complex things that you could build in it, you can get started without coding, and the same thing with Zapier. Retool is it is effectively a oh my God, I am blanking. It's JavaScript framework. What is it? React. It's technically a React app builder. Like at its core, that's what it's doing. And you kind of have to script right from the get-go to use it. Although you can place things on a page without them doing anything, if that makes sense. But like with all of these, the low and low code is making it so that you could build something without coding, not necessarily the thing that you want. Because, the more you want, obviously, the more that the makers of Airtable and Coda, et cetera, had to think ahead to guess every possible use case. And I mean, they're not psychic, and they probably never will be.
Yeah. But it's interesting, you mentioned the date dependency stuff coming in. That's replaced a lot of what people would have been scripting about before, right? So you do have those extra features, which takes away from the need to build custom. But I'm sure people are already now adding scripts on top of how date dependencies work to get it to exactly fit how they want.
Exactly. It's a great point. I mean, they kind of wait for users to tell them what they want by their actions, kind of like see what people are building, find the common denominator, and then build that as a core feature.
Yeah. Another comment in here, he said he is using Retool to build internal tools. So he obviously already kind of has that, he knows how, he's a developer. And so he's probably even more like automatically will lean a little bit more towards, it starts with this, but I could add this and this to it. And so that's probably something else to keep in mind too.
Yeah. No, I liked at Airtable, there was something when Airtable presented, they talked about one of their goals being having a low floor but a high ceiling. So it's kind of corporate speak, but I like the meaning of it, where it's, you can get in at the ground level and figure some stuff out, but if you need to scale it, you have the ability to get more advanced.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to the BuiltOnAir Slack community. Oh, look, and it's actually our own Russell who made this comment. So you were featured. So this is the new feature. You can talk to us a little bit about this, about a user being able to select grouping in interfaces.
Yeah. I think this is very cool. I'm surprised that it's taken so long for it to come out, but essentially what this feature means is that anywhere that you display data that can show in groups, including things like timelines, surprisingly, the group control is now visible and can be changed by the end user. That second screenshot there showing you that you can toggle that on and off, which is really helpful. Like often you'll have to make two interfaces or views so that you can group things by two different ways, kind of like pivoting on a different axis. So this actually lets users do that themselves, which I think is a real time save. Only annoying thing about this, I don't know if anyone else noticed, but it was turned on by default in everything that I'd ever made. Which because I usually like to hide the controls that we don't need by default, right? Because it's noise. But so now everything has group next to it. So that's one way of releasing the feature, right? Just throw it in everyone's face.
I could see why they would do that, but I think that they shouldn't have. Ideally, I feel like one of two things might have been a better approach. One, have it off by default and make an announcement that this is now a feature. But sometimes it takes forever to people to notice that new things are there, unless it's like right in their face. Or alternatively, enable it by default if you had sort enabled for the end user. Like if you notice that none of the end user controls are on, well, don't throw group in there. But if you had sort already enabled, maybe you put it on those. Like those, I think, would have been better approaches than like globally adding it, just because it same thing. I had some where I didn't let anyone sort or filter, but you could group differently. And so it was a little weird that you could do that.
Now I want the ability for list views to be able to summarize, like have a summary row like you can in Grid and in Timeline. I love the way the list view looks, but it's missing some of those features.
At that point, aren't we just choosing like the style of that data almost? Like you could make grids look more like lists and vice versa, right? It has a background color in gray. Each nesting level is lighter or darker. Because I agree, I have clients who are like, but we love how the list looks, but we do need the summary. So you end up doing silly workarounds.
It's one of those things where like the true differentiator in terms of functionality that the list view adds is the hierarchy bit, which Grid doesn't do. But if you need that summary, like if you're building a financial dashboard or something, you want to see the sum of the group or the total, and you can't do that in a list. So it's one of those things where it's good that you can switch which visualization you're looking at. For the end user, you can have that toggle, have a predefined grid and a list, but it would sure be great if you didn't need both. And the fact that Grid is missing from the create new page, you kind of have to do it after you've created the page. Convert something into a grid suggests to me that they want to get rid of Grid, or they keep forgetting it, which I feel is less likely. I think that it's sort of them pushing people towards list, but we're going to keep wanting Grid for as long as there's stuff in Grid that there isn't in list.
And there's also that fixed left-hand like primary field, right, that sticks with Grid, which is quite helpful, but you don't get that in list. There's all these like one thing missing in the other that you'd actually just kind of want to have available in all of them.
Russell, you're going to love my segment.
Oh, excellent. Can't wait.
So Justin here says, I want to be able to have independent field visibility on list pages with tabs. Currently, each tab has the same fields.
That would be great.
We are inching closer to a world in which personal views are like replicated into interface, because in the full page like interface things, or not even like across the board with interface pages, you can have a predefined set of filters and now sorts and now groups, and then the end user can go in and adjust them. That doesn't affect everyone else, but the field visibility is still set by the builder. That's the sort of missing piece in terms of completely replicating what you can do in a personal view in the data tab.
Yeah. And I'd love to be able to show, like, to Justin's point, like if you have two tabs, that's like incomplete tasks and then completed tasks. And if you have like date complete, for example, I don't need the date complete on the incomplete tab. I just need it on the complete one. Yep. Nice to haves for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll get there. Little
Hopefully.
at a time.
That's the slogan of this show, isn't it?
Maybe.
Yeah. Okay. So next up, just a shout out to the BuiltOnAir community in Slack. We're all in the BuiltOnAir community. Our pictures are all on here. So join us. Just go to BuiltOnAir.com. You can be part of the community. Has lots of great Airtable questions and lots of great information. Okay, moving on. I thought this was a good tip. Nerdy Airtable tip for more scalable automations. And y'all will have to give your opinion on this. Add a number to single select fields that represent a sequence of events. So like tasks or things like that to, basically label them, go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and your tasks, and maybe helps keep it in order a little more. Do y'all do that, or what do you think about that?
I sometimes number my automations if they're part of a big process. And I do use single selects to trigger those automations. So this might be nice it's kind of maybe it makes it a lot easier for somebody else to step in if you're handing it off to a client, or you're working on a team and someone else needs to make an edit to your automation. It definitely makes it easier to follow.
Yeah. He talked about referring to step numbers in documentation and using that number in the code. So I guess essentially if the task changes slightly, maybe the number won't. But something to think about.
Yeah.
Okay. Next up, this one just popped up this morning, and so wanted to talk about it. Jen noticed when she was, I guess, creating an email automation, and she was pulling in the find records, and it actually let you choose, I guess, the page from the interface.
Oh, yeah. So there's an option to open this record. And so in the before times, your only option was the record URL. So base ID / table ID / record ID. And then interfaces came along, and then there were detail pages. And then there was okay, which detail page do you want to go to? And I think that's what this is.
Okay. So you can choose that instead of having to use the URL.
You can choose this is a find record.
Okay. This is when you're using the data from your find, right? So when you want to insert something from that find, you can insert the page to get in view. I thought this was a configuration for a find record step for a second. Yeah.
I did too.
Yeah. So it's open this record in my project interface.
Yeah.
Oh, I got really excited. For a second, I was thinking something I've wanted for so long is if you have an interface and the end user has that filtered a certain way, and you want them to be able to click a button that's do something with these records that are in front of me as the end user right now. That would be amazing. That's kind of where my mind went immediately, and then I was oh, never mind. That's not actually as useful as I was hoping. But yeah, that would be a really huge, cool thing I could do a lot with.
Yeah. But okay, next up, I think this is Camille, maybe part of what you were talking about. Well, we talked about, group descriptions can now be inline or tooltips. View-based groups cannot be set to auto. Group layouts can now have vertical columns, and groups can now be set to editable or view only. So it looks like just some more refreshed record review page.
So that's what I'll be going over later. There's kind of a lot in here, and one of those was a typo. So
okay.
So it says cannot be set to auto. It's can now be set to auto. So previously,
Okay.
grid elements on detail pages and then the equivalent for record layout were like really small. You can now set it to be taller. Is basically all that's saying, which is good. And then I'll go over some of the nuances with the new like drag and drop component. And then, we also talked about how end users can now group as well as sort and filter, etc.
Awesome. Okay. Perfect. Okay. And then the last one, I discovered this one. I don't know if it's been discussed before, but someone asked about using the Slack channel as basically a user interface to an Airtable base. And Scott said, use this tool called Data Fetch that basically in Slack, you can type in a query and it will return Airtable records that match what you're looking for. So it's like in chat data for Slack, which seems pretty unique. I thought that was kind of neat to be able to just find something by typing it into Slack.
Mm-hmm. That is interesting.
I think it's really cool. There's plenty of workflows that end in send this notification or report to Slack. So it makes sense that someone who's there expecting that they're receiving data can also ask questions about it or get other information. Makes loads of sense. Lots of people want this AI chatbot that understands all of your data in the base and can tell you things about it. So this is just another way of sending your query.
Yeah. It seems like a pretty neat tool to be able to connect. So check that
I haven't
one
seen
out.
it done though. I'd love to see a demo of that.
Yeah.
Really cool.
I'm almost certain we've had them on the podcast. I might be hallucinating, much like AI, but I think we have. I know their data fetcher is a different thing.
Yeah, that's who I was
thinking. They also
of.
have been on the podcast, but I'm pretty sure we've seen.
Them.
Either that or I've had my own demo and I'm misremembering where I saw it.
Okay. Awesome. Well, cool tool if you want to be able to communicate with your Airtable data in Slack or Microsoft Teams. Okay, that's it for Around the Bases. So we are going to talk about our sponsor, Untitled Backups. Untitled Backups automatically backs up your Airtable data on a regular schedule. That could be daily, weekly, or monthly. And if you want to ensure you always have a version of your data, it backs it up into your Google Drive, Dropbox, or Box, and you'll always have a copy, whether that's for compliance reasons, for data security reasons, or to just ensure you always have it. Check out Untitled Backups. You can get a discount using promo code BuiltOnAir. So if you want to automate your Airtable backups, go check that out. Okay, up next, we get to meet the expert Russell, and Camille is going to interview him, and we're going to learn more about Russell and all that he is doing. So let me switch over here.
Hello, Russell.
Okay.
Hello again, Camille.
Welcome back to the show. You are one of our many people who are in the BuiltOnAir Slack community. And you are one of those people who always has like interesting observations about Airtable. And I just, for our viewers, want to see, how did you come across Airtable in the first place?
So I used to work at a UX UI design agency based in London called Lighthouse, and we had a problem with our resourcing internally where we grew to a stage where we didn't know what everyone was working on, and the CEO at the time turned to me in the office and said, how can we find out what people are working on at the moment? And we built a few different solutions and spreadsheets and some other SaaS stuff that does a pretty good job. Harvest, for example, does some sort of resourcing and forecasting. And eventually he found Airtable and said, this looks like it might be able to build anything for us, so maybe that's a good option. And myself and the CTO at the time were a bit too snobby about the idea that you could build your own software, like WYSIWYG essentially, and thought there's no way that would ever be capable enough of doing. History tells us that actually I was quite wrong about that. We had a simple scheduling tool in it. And then after about 2 years, that essentially became the major component of my job. And I kind of built out an operating system for our business in Airtable, which pretty much ran everything. So yeah, it certainly became quite viral in what we were doing at that company.
WYSIWYG brought me back.
But the idea that with no code, no technical experience, you could build a product that people can use for everyday work seemed like we were going to get something rubbish that no one would enjoy and it would be thrown away. But yeah, lo and behold, I was very wrong.
Well, I think there's something to be said about that. When you're moving from one system to another, whether it's technology or it's a manual process, there's always this like, well, I mean, it kind of works now. So you're always going to be comparing A to B, and there's going to be, I'm sure there were things that you couldn't do, especially when you first started with Airtable before they added a lot of the more recent feature sets. And so
certainly
it's always, I think, an interesting process to really look at what do you need right now in order to move forward, and whether or not your software of choice, in this case Airtable, meets those needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the magic happens where you realize that you've built some set of master data, and that is information that you want to reuse across lots of different things. So to do resourcing, we need a list of all the people in the business and what their availability is. And then we need what projects we're working on and who the clients are behind those projects. So with a master list of that information, it's obvious that you would then go, I'll add on next tool here, or here's a forecast of our revenue because we know what people are going to be doing for the next 6 months. So yeah, I think that's how it sticks. And that is the magic thing that happens that you don't really get with other tools where, the feature set is the feature set, right? Yeah.
So you were saying you were kind of working with other SaaS tools. So it may not be as much the case, but we see a lot of people move from things that are straight spreadsheets into Airtable and doing things a spreadsheet kind of way without kind of adjusting the thinking to be more of a database kind of way, the way Airtable is structured. Did you have a process like that as well, even though you were already using like a SaaS tool?
A process for starting work, or just what software we're using?
The version 1 of whatever you guys were building before was built a certain way to fit that SaaS, and then moving into Airtable, surely something had to change. And I was curious what that process was.
Well, actually, so of the things we tried, the version that stuck around the longest was a spreadsheet, which was not, we didn't usually build a lot of things in spreadsheets to manage our work. We would rather pay a subscription, try the trial of a piece of software. The spreadsheet worked the best because we could customize, you could do whatever you like in a spreadsheet. So it can fit exactly how we want to display that information. So yeah, that definitely, I think that's why that worked for us for the longest time, because it was structured how we wanted it to. But before that, we would, find the right SaaS tool for the job. Like all of our task and project management was run through Asana, because Asana is very good at managing tasks. That's what it does, but you can't build on top of Asana in quite the same way.
So now that you're fully ensconced in the world of Airtable,
very much so,
there's a lot of different builds that start on Airtable or like are centered around Airtable, but still use a lot of other SaaS tools and platforms. And we talk endlessly about Zapier and make integrations. And just curious, do you have a preferred like connector to any other apps that you might need?
Yeah, so I have dived into this world a bit more than when I last spoke to you guys. I started a consultancy late last year called Mass. For almost all of the projects we put together, the ethos is to try and hand off the most simple tech stack as possible to clients, which I'm sure everyone's thinking is towards this. But it is very easy to throw as many other tools at it as possible, because often that's a good shortcut. On the Make versus Zapier endless argument, we do use Make, But generally, there's a lot of stuff that you can do just working with APIs in a script in Airtable. That means you don't actually need to set up a series of scenarios, because you don't really want to leave your client with 3 sets of logins, 3 sets of subscriptions. Where possible, it's better to simplify that stuff. It's less support, that kind of thing. But yeah, when needed for OAuth and anything that's slightly more complicated, we'll side with something like Make, because it is capable for that kind of stuff.
I do like that ethos, though, of delivering a product that works, but B, a product that is relatively simple for whomever you're building it for to actually operate, because it can have 1,000 bells and whistles, but if you don't know how to whistle, it's kind of hard to maintain over time.
Exactly. And they're all, this is software development, and that is a dependency, right? So you should be trying to pay down your dependencies. Otherwise, that will be more expensive over time.
Awesome. So I believe you have something that you'd like to show us.
Yeah, I realized today that I'm never here showing you a project that has any business relevance to anyone. It is always like a fun thing that I think that's the only stuff that Hannah picks up on.
That's why we bring you on, for the fun.
Hey, any of it's great. We know you have multifaceted, Russell.
Well, there you go. Yes, I will.
Let me switch over real quick. We're going to do a base showcase with Russell here. So
let's make sure I've got the right browser. Okay. It took me quite a while to figure out how best to explain this to everyone, but here goes nothing. So, in a past life, before I had children, I used to DJ and mix music. And if you mix music on like DJ hardware, you essentially need to own all of your music. And even to this day, you still need a library of MP3s that you are purchasing and collecting over many years. Mine is, to this date, 15 years old. You probably all at some point had that phase of taking all of your CDs from CD racks and burning them into iTunes or something similar. And then probably quite a few years ago at this point, you decided that you no longer needed to maintain that library anymore, and you use a streaming service for $10 a month, and you look back on this world. But I haven't left that world. I'm still here because I still need that library of music, partly for archive purposes, partly because some of it just isn't available on streaming platforms, and I've spent a lot of money on it. But the problem with having a library of MP3 files is that it's actually quite hard to stream them. There's a few pieces of software in this space that do some of the job that I wanted to do, but again, it's not exactly how I want to manage my music library, and we're in the business of doing things exactly how you want them to. So I have put together a vanity project, which I've had for a few years now, called Airwaves, and essentially what it allows me to do is stream those MP3 files from Google Drive, which is my file storage, to any browser connected device. Essentially, it's just a JavaScript front end, which I'll go on to in a second. A bit of background as to how I got here. So I think it was 2021 when I started thinking about this idea, and my initial proof of concept for how this would work was I put an HTML audio tag on a page, and I set the source to be a file in Google Drive, and clicked on play. And luckily for me, it started playing the file. Now that's a lot of hard work that I didn't need to do when building a media player, which is that I have a player that knows how to stream MP3s. I can play and pause. And you get a lot of freebies as well. So when you play any audio source like this in your phone or desktop, or it's playing through a device in your car, all of your media controls are run through the Navigator API, which means that when you press play or pause on a device, it will actually play and pause it as it's supposed to. All of these things that you don't have to build bespoke, which is particularly helpful with, probably one of the most daunting things to think about with audio files is how do I actually work with them. But you get a lot of that for free just with good old HTML tags. So then I mocked up what that would look like, maybe whether I needed it as an extension, or at the time it was a block in Airtable, and whether I could have it sitting alongside the records or how that might work. But of course, putting it actually within Airtable means that accessing it on other devices like the mobile app or web browser for Airtable isn't great. And it was kind of adding some unnecessary complexity there. So the eventual decision was that I needed to have a front end in the browser that I could use and access the music from there. A bit more process. These are some sketches I did early on when I got excited about this idea, when I realized actually I could design this thing. My background is in design, so it's nice to be able to wireframe these things out now that I know it's possible. And then from there, I started doing some design work and thinking about what the styling of this would be. Again, all of this, I would like to remind you, is just a product for me that could never scale to any other people. It would be impossible to do so. It wouldn't make any sense to do so, but I put a lot of effort into a one-person product because I got excited about it. So the tech stack and how it works. This is the current version. It has had some much more convoluted versions before, but I'll explain it to you now. So essentially, there is file storage, which is Google Drive, which is where all of the MP3s sit in a folder with a series of subfolders, just like, again, how iTunes organizes your music into a series of folders by artist name. I have a Node app, which I can send an MP3 file to. It will read the metadata, figure out who the artist is, what the album is, cuts the album artwork off of the end of it and exports it as a JPEG, and is able to send that back to Airtable. Airtable is the library of all tracks, artists, albums, and playlists. And obviously, it's a relational database, so we're linking all of that stuff together to describe who's the artist of this track. And finally, there's a JavaScript front end, which is pretty simple, to be honest. I'll show it in a second, which just allows me to read from the API that Airtable has and search through certain tables in there, essentially. So if I want to search for a track, I can use a search bar in there to find it. It also manages a queue. So essentially, whenever I play a song, I wrote some JavaScript that will then find the other songs in that album and add them to the queue. Then it will find other tracks by the same artists and add them to the queue. So essentially, it will just keep loading in music for me that's similar to what I started playing in the first place. There's some minutiae around how I deal with zip files and RAR files. So the reason for this is that if you buy an album off of something like Bandcamp, they will give you a zip file for you to use. And typically it's quite annoying if I do that on my phone to then need a desktop computer to unzip it and put it in the right folder. So essentially I have this like tumbling set of scenarios where a RAR file gets converted to a zip. The zip then gets converted and unarchived to a series of MP3 files. They get sent into Airtable. Airtable then sends that to Node to process the MP3s. Node sends those back to Airtable as a track. And finally, Make will then sort them into the right folder. So because I now know the artist, because some of the automations in Airtable will figure out who the artists are, it will then find or create a folder in Google Drive with that artist name and organize the MP3 into that folder. So it does actually self-organize now, which is quite fun.
Awesome.
Again, one person project. One user. I do want to remind everyone of this. Some gotchas, some stuff that might actually be relevant or useful to people to understand here. So I do use the Google Drive synced table, which is the only project I've ever actually used it on. I can't use it for all of the files because it has a maximum of 10,000 files and I have 16,000 in my library. So instead what I do is I use a specific subfolder in my Google Drive called new. It's actually _new, so it's always at the top of my music folder. And any songs that I buy, I put into that folder, and that is what's triggering some of these automations to say there's a new file, zip file or MP3, send it off to be processed or convert it for us. So actually, new music essentially empties out as the processes are run. So usually that is an empty tab because all the music's been processed. So it's kind of a sneaky way of using Google Drive to trigger automations. A much older version of this used some Google Sheets scripting by a very talented developer I worked with on Upwork to trigger when a new file was found, but that meant keeping another version of the database with a series of IDs. It was a bit nuts, but yeah, this little workaround means I can actually use the Google Drive integration. It's much simpler.
That's awesome.
Any questions before I continue?
Just sheer amazement is all.
I like that you can use Google Drive with it. Like it's already all in there and you're just sending it through and like automating, especially that zip process, like unzipping it and turning it back into. That's super awesome. Put it in a folder and then it's processed.
Yeah, it's made it much simpler. It sounds really silly, but like the process of trying to find the folder with an artist name that starts with R is very far down the alphabet, and I would literally on my phone have to scroll for ages to get there. So that's actually why I ended up doing this, because I realized like I just need to be able to dump this somewhere and let the robots do the rest of the work. So luckily we did that.
Awesome.
The automations are quite simple. Essentially, we read the metadata and then figure out who the artists are and link them through to a certain table. It will do things like if it realizes an artist is twice in the metadata, then it will remove one example of it, so it doesn't have like a repeat in the file name. And the last silly trick is that every track is linked to a single record in a table which has a total, and the reason for that is because when I shuffle, you need to know how many tracks there are in the database to be able to say like get me a random number between 1 and something. So I link every track to a single record so that I have this number that I can reuse.
Awesome.
So some other silly hacks that make it work. And this is the final thing. I think if I pressed anything it might, oh no, maybe you wouldn't be able to hear it. Is there sound? You don't need sound. I think that would be a bad thing.
We believe you that it's playing.
So really, yeah, this is the. So I just played. Thank you. I just played one song, and it then loads in all of the related album, and then other examples of that artist's music. So it will just keep playing through and through.
Now, do you ever use this like play your own shuffle, like while you're working, and turn that on and just roll through it?
All the time. The time. It is playing most of the day, which probably, I guess, warrants the amount of effort I've put into it. But yeah. I do have a Spotify subscription, but I mostly play music through this.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. There we go.
I got nothing. This
is
insane.
The things we build when we figure out how to build them. Hey, maybe I can just do this and this. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Love it.
The worst part is it's not even finished. There's plenty of other things I want to do with it, which is probably the sadder part of it. But there we go. Hobbyists, eh?
Well, that's awesome. Thank you for showcasing that. And maybe it will inspire someone else to build out their own library and use Airtable to store everything and showcase it. That's awesome.
Godspeed.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Russell. All right. Up next, just a shout out to the BuiltOnAir community. It's an awesome community. If you love Airtable and automation, come join it. We have lots of great people in there. If you have questions about Airtable or things you're working on or need even someone to bounce ideas off of, there's a lot of great people in there who can talk with you about it and give you ideas and advice. And I'd love to have you join us. Just go to BuiltOnAir.com and you can join the community for free. All right, up next, we have Camille, who is going to go over the new record reviews and showcase what's all about it. So, all right, Camille.
There's so much to go over that I made an interface about this interface with a series of features that I noticed that are either added or removed. And then I'm going to do my best to go over some of the nuances because there's a lot of things that, personal opinion aside, some would find minimal, and some would find major. So I've highlighted certain features that are probably very important to somebody, and then other features where I feel like may not have been noticed that are missing, if that makes sense. So what we're currently looking at is the new record review layout. It looks largely similar to the previous or the legacy version of this layout. Something to note: when you create an interface page, you cannot, at this time of recording, select the legacy version. It was the same thing with record detail pages. They later went back and added a convert to legacy option. It's possible that they might do that with this, depending on public outcry. So, listen to the following and determine how much of an issue this is. Note that there are some things missing with this edition, but several things were added. So while it looks very similar, some of the things that carry over from the newer version of interface pages, like the full page, I'm going to call them data view layouts, the full page grid, the full page calendar, etc., are the notion of either tabs or drop downs. I find this pretty useful. So if I wanted to go to just the things that I have highlighted, this will think for a second because I didn't reload the page since yesterday. But now I have a filtered subset of things here. The other thing that is brought over from the full page record data view layouts is the ability to export this thing as CSV. I'm not sure if you would ever really need that, but you could download this list as CSV and it would look exactly how you anticipate. In the legacy and the current version, you could have up to 3 fields displayed here, as well as an attachment field. All of those would be exported with CSV if you were to click this feature. You could also print whatever page you're currently looking at, this one, or print all features. I'm going to preview and hopefully that shows up on the screen. In my opinion, this looks pretty bad. Or at least buggy is perhaps how I would describe it, but it is a feature that is there. So eventually it might look better. I don't know if you guys can see this, the print window that came up.
No, we just got the great page behind it.
Nope, yeah. Never mind. Well, try it for yourself. I think it looks a little odd. The page breaks are off and sometimes it doesn't. Like the color of your base kind of shows up in the right hand sidebar. I don't know. But that is a feature that was added. Eventually, hopefully that ends up looking better. So some of the features that are useful as part of this update: if you had a linked record to whatever record you've clicked on from the sidebar, you can do several things with the linked records themselves, mainly displaying them as a data view, which you could have done on legacy, but you also have the ability to have all the end user controls like sort, group, and filter directly on there. Something that is fairly nuanced in the legacy version, you could add new records by clicking the plus or via a form, but you couldn't link and unlink existing records. That wasn't a thing. You can do that with the new version. That is a very minute addition that I think would take a lot of people a very long time to notice unless they spent several hours, like I did, looking at 2 of them side by side. Something that is also, I think, a pretty big deal, but might not be immediately obvious. Although you can filter the linked records, and I'll go to a different tab. This is a real interface that I use with all fake data. This is the legacy version of the layout. And something that you could do previously was filter everything on the page with one filter element. So that filters this grid, it filters this number, it filters this chart. If I go to the new version, I could filter this grid because the filter is baked right on it, but I can't filter this chart. I can put a chart there, but I can't filter the chart. So that's something that's missing. And I also can't put numbers on the new record review layout. This is a regular roll-up field, but because it's a roll-up field, I can't filter on top of that. So if I wanted to see the total amount of bills, I have no way of doing that with a roll-up. So they're not exactly one-to-one match in terms of functionality. Obviously, the background color is something that is like immediately noticeable as the difference between a roll-up and a number. But to me, the more like critical missing piece of that is the ability to filter it in the first place. So that's an issue, or at least an issue in from my perspective. Something that I do like, I mentioned before, you could either have drop downs or tabs. For this real interface that I use, I had two different pages, one for annual reporting and one for monthly reporting. With this consolidated one, I could just do this. Now, what is the difference between having a consolidated page versus multiple different pages? That means I don't have to design this chart twice. I can design one page and have it be the same. I also now have access to conditional visibility. So if I wanted certain elements on the page to be slightly different, whether I'm doing an annual report or a monthly report, because the new record review layout has access to conditional visibility, that's something I can do without having to design two entirely separate pages if everything else is supposed to be the same. Something to note, you cannot conditionally hide a chart by itself. You can hide individual fields by themselves, but you can't hide the chart by itself. What you would have to do is hide the whole group that the chart sits in. I think that's a little bit of an odd omission. I wish it weren't the case. But if you wanted to hide the chart, you would have to hide the whole group.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting.
So I'm just saying. So neither the legacy nor the current version of the record review layout are mobile ready. I suspect the new one will eventually be mobile ready. It's just not today. The reason why I suspected it will be is because record detail pages, the new ones, are mobile ready for the most part. So, and it works the same way. Like what we're seeing here is effectively a record detail page, but with this added thing on the side. So I think eventually we're probably going to see it for mobile readiness. They have not said that. That is me guessing. Predictable and pre-fillable URLs is something that I wanted to highlight, because if I go back to a legacy layout, you can hopefully see in my URL, you will never be able to guess what the unique ID for this thing is, this record selector, because it's random. But you would, once you know what it is, you could do equals and then pre-fill it with a URL. Or the record ID, I should say. And that would allow you to like predictably put this URL into an email or something that says, open up here. Now, with this new version, you can do the same thing. So that is nice. By contrast, record detail pages are fairly obscured. They have like an encoding on them that makes it hard to guess what the URL will actually be to pre-fill it without some use of a script. But I will say, if you start to filter this thing, hold on, if I filter this, then it starts to become obscured again. So it's predictable in a way, but also not. So something to consider. Something that is also lost with this new version is the sticky header. So if I scroll on this legacy version, you'll see 2024, all of this stuff stays up at the top. But in the new version, it doesn't. So that is something that I miss. I like having the title of the record I'm looking at stay at the top, as well as if I had any buttons up here, I would like those buttons to be at the top as well. That is not something that you can currently do with the new layout. Unconstrained non-field element placement. I had no idea what to call this feature.
Oh.
What I mean by that is in the legacy version of the record layout, record review layout, as well as the old record detail pages, you could put a lot of different elements virtually anywhere. I say virtually because you couldn't put a number element up here and you couldn't put a chart element up here, but you could put them roughly anywhere else. In the new version, you can put less things in the header and the header doesn't stick, and you can't put buttons anywhere you want. You can put buttons there, but you can't put them like in this space here. Now, because you can put a chart in the same place you can put fields, maybe it's possible that they're eventually going to add the same placement options for buttons. They have not said that, so that is a guess. But because we now have columns available for groups, I think they're leaning more towards greater like placement flexibility than what we've previously seen with these new layouts. And then something that is like really, really, I don't think I've seen anyone else note this. I could be wrong, but in the old layouts, you could have the record comments element, but you couldn't add record revision history. That wasn't an option. For the new layout, you have the option of adding one or both. So if you wanted to display revision history, you could. So that is a thing that is added with this new thing. And then I'm nowhere at time. I'm scrolling if there's anything major that I am missing. I think the last one that I like as a feature is the ability to download these as CSVs. It's something that we routinely get asked for some of the interface pages that I end up building. Is they want to be able to export as a CSV, but they always have to go back to the data view in order to do it. You can now do it more directly from here. Technically, there is an option also to print all of these records as well. I have it enabled for this thing. It is currently bugged. So even if you say, yes, allow them to print, you are not given the option to actually do so. I don't know why, but allegedly it is something that you should be able to do.
Awesome. Well, that's a great overview of all those new features.
It's not even all of them. There's more.
Oh, if only we had more
so
time.
Many.
Yes. Well, I love that they add some new ones. I hate that sometimes they take away stuff. So wish they should, do that. But that's a great overview of all the new features. So be sure and check that out in your Airtable base. Thank you, Camille, for showcasing all of that. And we are at time today. So thank you all for being here for the podcast. And be sure and join the BuiltOnAir community and at BuiltOnAir.com and say hi to all of us. And thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining today's episode. We hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to check out our sponsor, OnToAir Backups, automated backups for Airtable. We'll see you next time on the Built on Air podcast.